I was born in Prague, Czechoslovakia. My father was a Czechoslovak diplomat. And when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, we went to England. We lived there all through the war, through the Blitz, in exile. And then we came to the United States. My father defected, asked for political asylum, and we were refugees. He was known as a displaced person. The Rockefeller Foundation found him a job at the University of Denver. We had no idea where Denver was. I was desperate to be an ordinary American teenager, which was very difficult given my parents. My mother was this completely wonderful, delightful, happy nut. My father was a very serious person. He wanted to also fit in Colorado, which meant fishing, but he would go fishing in a coat and tie. We would go to the mountains every Sunday and have picnics. We'd stop always for some kind of a snack. I, the dutiful daughter, I always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. And I still, to this day, wherever I am, I always order the cheapest thing on the menu.
Even if you're paying?
Yes. When I went to Wellesley, I was one of the editors on the Wellesley News. It was quite a conservative school, and most of the people were Republicans. And I was always a Democrat. And so there were a group of us that actually worked for Adlai Stevenson. My first fundraising experience was to go into Boston, and I was walking around. There was a campaign, Dollars for Democrats. And as I'm walking through Boston, this crusty old man says, $5 for you, baby, but not $1 for the Democrats. We were very much a transitional generation. There's just no question about it. Some of the women did get engaged while they were in college. I waited a really long time to get married, 3 days after graduation. And then I was told I was going to have twins that had to eat every 3 hours. I thought I would go out of my mind. So I decided to go to graduate school. Some of my contemporaries would say to me, "Why are you not in the carpool line instead of at the library working on your PhD?" And I would say that every woman's middle name is Guilt. And I found it exceptionally hard that there were women that were criticizing me, which is where I came up with that statement that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other. And in graduate school, my professor was Zbigniew Brzezinski. All of a sudden, Dr. Brzezinski's big called me up and he said, "Would you come and work for the National Security Council?" I have a choice between having a large office in the old executive office building or a closet in the West Wing. I chose the closet in the West Wing, which was fantastic. And I sat in on every meeting that President Carter had with members of Congress. And so I learned an awful lot. It never occurred to me that I could be Secretary of State. And when my name came up, people would say, well, a woman can't be Secretary of State because Arab countries will not deal with a woman. And I'd been ambassador at the UN for 4 years, so the Arab ambassadors put out a statement saying we have no problems with Ambassador Albright. We would have no problems with Secretary Albright. But I actually had more problems with the men in our own government. They would kind of look at me in meetings and I could just tell they thought, how did she get to be Secretary of State when I should be Secretary of State? I often say I would not have been Secretary of State if it hadn't been for Hillary. And the reason I know is that she'd say, well, why wouldn't you name Madeleine? She is the one who is closest to your views, expresses them better than anybody else, and besides, it would make your mother happy. I loved being at Wellesley. I learned to think, I learned to question, and I learned the power of friendships. I would not be who I am if I hadn't gone to Wellesley.
first time I met Madeleine Albright in 1988. I could tell she was brilliant, tough, and talented. She was a passionate believer in freedom, democracy, and human rights, and her worldview was forged from her childhood. After 4 years of outstanding service at the UN, with a great sense of humor to go along with her keen understanding of our changing world.
Frankly, this is not cojones. This is cowardice.
I was proud to nominate her as Secretary of State.
Nomination, Department of State. Madeleine K. Albright of the District of Columbia to be Secretary.
I, Madeleine Corbell Albright,
do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear.
I was the first woman Secretary of State, and I loved working for a president who understood America's role. It was my greatest honor.
Madeleine knew firsthand that our decisions had the power to make a difference for real people around the world. She saw that as both an obligation and an opportunity. She knew that if America was going to thrive in the 21st century, we'd have to do so through the strengths of our partnership, our commitment to cooperation, our moral leadership, and the trust we inspired in people around the world. As the end of the Cold War ushered in a new era of interdependence, Madeleine seemed made for the moment.
I pledge that you will grow up with America at your side as you seek to build a better Kosovo.
Fortunately for all of us, she never stops.
I have always tried to look for something that's more interesting to do than the thing I did before. Not easy if you've been Secretary of State.
She's always there with a wise word, a fresh insight, the jolt of her classic wit.
I heard this man saying, "Can you imagine I'm a refugee and I just got my naturalization certificate from the Secretary of State?" And I went up to him and I said, "Can you imagine that a refugee is Secretary of State?"
Are just a bucking up when we need it most.
Our experience is proof positive of the importance of having women's voices in the government.
From her incredible journey from refugee to Secretary of State, to her ongoing efforts to educate the next generation about the importance and benefits of diplomacy.
Giving people who want to make a difference the opportunity to do it, and I hope that I'll be able to do that until the day I die.
No one more fittingly defines what it means to be a true global citizen than Madeleine Albright.